We already
Yeah.
had some, I'll share this too. A little bit about the origin story of even what even made me consider not only Amada but this space. My story starts with my great grandmother, who was my first best friend. She actually, my mother worked in a steel mill. As I shared, I was raised single parent in Gary, Indiana. My mother worked in a steel mill, so she would take me to my great grandparents every weekend to go to church.
Mm.
About the time I was seven, my great grandmother, I remember one day vividly coming home from church to her home, and my mom telling me that my great grandmother had what they call old folks disease at the time. And I'm like, old folks disease? Of
No
course, I had no
way.
knowledge. I'm like, okay, grandma has old folks
Yeah.
disease. She's old. It is what it
She's
is.
all
No,
right. Yeah.
fast forward a couple years later, by the time I'm nine, we come home from church, go into her bedroom, and I'm standing next to my mom in her bedroom. And my great grandmother says to my mom, she said, "Vicky, who's that handsome little boy next to you?" And I'm like, "Grandma, it's Kevin. It's me." And so that started me down this path. Didn't even really know, and we did a lot to support her through her journey.
Why don't we start with your background? I always think it's interesting to give your background of where were you before Amada Senior Care. Talk about your career, and then what led to Amada Senior Care. How did you find us? Can we start there?
All right. So first, good afternoon. Kevin Hall, Amada Senior Care,
Good afternoon.
Elgin, Illinois. So my background, career-wise, so short story, my degree is in IT. Probably didn't know that.
I did not know that,
Yeah,
Kevin.
yeah, yeah. So I was going to college for business administration with the goal of going to law school. I met my partner, which is now my wife and partner in this business, my
Mm-hmm.
sophomore year. And long story short, life moves quickly. We were pregnant by the end of my junior year. So I had some decisions to make. During that time, as we were going
Mm.
through those steps, we were both caregivers in separate organizations and so on and so forth. So I ended up changing my major to from business administration to management information systems because at the time I came out of
Ah,
college in '02. There were a lot of people who, I guess I should say, I had a lot of buddies who were graduating in with IT degrees, making good, decent salaries, good living wage to take care of a family. So I did just that, changed my major
mm-hmm.
from business administration to management information systems, and started to do some local volunteering to get some experience in the IT world. And that landed me my first
Mm-hmm.
internship was with a company called Tredegar Films as a business systems coordinator. Did that successfully and was offered a position upon graduation as a business systems coordinator with that organization. Fast forward,
Now, were you in Illinois at this point?
hmm? Go ahead.
Are you in Illinois at this point? Or where are you in the country?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. And I was at school in Indiana State, which was in Terre Haute, Indiana. And so,
Okay.
yeah, when I graduated from Indiana State University, I worked for that company that I spoke of, Tredegar Films. And then from there, um, got downsized after about a year. I came out of college, like I said, in '02. So there was a lot of talent in the market that were taking positions like what I had, but they were bringing a lot more experience. So, things happen for a reason.
Wow.
And from there, I got into
Yeah.
sales and marketing. And that's when I got with like Enterprise Rent a Car, Enterprise, on and so forth. I worked in the car rental industry, did very well there. From car rental industry, got into pharmaceuticals, did very well there. Was able to kind of, promote a bunch of times in a bunch of different roles. A lot of good experiences, a lot of good exposure. And
Yeah.
then to sum up to the last part of your question as to what how did we find Amada? How did I get here? So the short story there, in 2015, I was reached out to via email, Yahoo. I'll date myself and Amada but I was reached out to.
Yahoo email.
Yeah, Yahoo email, man. They sent me an email, just basically kind of, I won't say fishing, but just introducing, some of the opportunities to own a franchise. And at that time, it was just a different time in my life. Had two young daughters, so on and so forth, and was really starting to see a lot of rise in my, career in the pharmaceutical side. At that time, I kind of checked it in the mind, but didn't take action. Well, fast forward to 2023. Early 2023, I had a gentleman who owns actually Amada in Gurney, Illinois. We'll just call him DJ, just to be respectful. And so DJ, he had posted something on LinkedIn. He had
Uh-huh.
posted, he had posted a, just like a little blurb on LinkedIn, speaking to a trip that he had won with Amada Senior Care. And I'm like, Amada,
Oh yeah.
this sounds
Uh-huh.
familiar. I'm like.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting about DJ is so I was a national sales trainer at a company called Daiichi Sankyo when DJ started his pharma career. And so when he came into pharma, I was his first trainer. All right. And so that started that relationship.
Wow.
Well, fast forward to when he made that post, kind of tickled the brain. I'm like, you want a trip and Amada? Let me reach out. So I reached out to him and he shared his story and his experiences with Amada. And I said, let me do some homework. Let me look into it. And so that started this pathway, that conversation with Dave in early 2023. And that's kind of how I got introduced into Amada. Long answer for a short question.
So I've heard great things about Enterprise. Did that time at Enterprise help you get into the pharmaceutical side of sales?
Pretty much. I'd say, enterprise definitely prepares you for the ups and downs of sales and the realities of the expectations of leadership to deliver results. And it helps you with your confidence if you're able to successfully kind of make it through their system. So I'd say yes.
So you're mentioning that I think you found Amada Senior Care in 2023, but or was it 23 or what
So
year
no,
was it?
I started my process, or we started our process, my partner and I, in 2023. We opened our doors in 2024. However, I
Mm,
was introduced to Amada in 2015, initially,
wow.
just with the random email. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And 2015, who was the email from?
I can't. I don't. You know what? I think it was from your partner in crime. Let's see. I can see his
From
face.
Tim,
Yes, Valencia.
which
Yeah.
probably means because as we do a lot of advertising and really truly targeting to folks like you on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I bet we probably found your profile on LinkedIn and then started reaching out to you. So, and this has changed over the years, but so many of our initial franchise partners came from med device and pharma
Hmm.
because our very first franchise partner, Rob, was Pfizer, right? So we thought,
Yep.
let's just do that.
Yep.
Okay, so that was 2015, 2016. So what takes you from 2016, 2023? And I don't think this is unusual. I think most people who acquire a franchise don't just wake up one morning and then a month later they own a franchise. It's usually years and years of thinking about it and trying to find the right business and the right timing. But what was it for you? What was that gap between 16 and 23?
I was raising a family. When in
Yeah.
15 and 16, when I was reached out to initially, I had a young family, a couple young daughters, a budding career in pharmaceuticals. So things were moving in the right direction for my family, the right trajectory. However, I was intrigued in 2015, and as I shared with you earlier, my wife and I were both caregivers in college, so we already
Yeah.
had some. I'll share this too. A little bit about the origin story of even what even made me consider not only Amada but this space. My story starts with my great grandmother, who was my first best friend. She actually, my mother worked in a steel mill. As I shared, I was raised single parent in Gary, Indiana. My mother worked in a steel mill, so she would take me to my great grandparents every weekend to go to church.
Mm.
About the time I was seven, my great grandmother, I remember one day vividly coming home from church to her home. And my mom telling me that my great grandmother had what they call old folks disease at the time. And I'm like, old folks disease. Of
No
course, I had no
way.
knowledge. I'm like, oh, okay, grandma has old folks
Yeah.
disease. She's old. You know, it is what it
She's
is.
all
So
right. Yeah.
fast forward a couple years later, by the time I'm 9, we come home from church, go into her bedroom, and I'm standing next to my mom in her bedroom. And my great grandmother says to my mom, she said, Vicky, who's that handsome little boy next to you? And I'm like, Grandma, it's Kevin, it's me. And so that started me down this path. Didn't even really know, and we did a lot to support her through her journey. So fast forward back into 2023, and that gap was just really life preparing me for what was to come. With
Yeah.
different experiences, different exposure. Pharma is different than like enterprise rent a car. I worked for 3M, where I was doing like sales of things and such. When you're selling something tangible, versus in pharma is more, to me, in my humble perspective, prepares you from an understanding of marketing, right? Because in enterprise and 3M, you're selling in a traditional fashion.
Yeah.
When you get into pharma, while yes, medications, but it's a different type of sale, and so you learn a lot about marketing and how to effectively do so. And so I would say between my experiences with enterprise and companies like 3M, and then my experiences in the pharmaceutical industry, to me was like a perfect storm, if you will, to get introduced
Hmm.
to an opportunity with Amada Senior Care.
Man, it's fascinating what you talked about with your with your grandma. How long did she live after that?
So she, through that journey, from the time that I was 7, she passed away when I was 11. So
Wow. So she had levels of dementia all the way until she passed away at 11.
yep, it went from what we know now as early, mid, and late stages, just keeping it 3 stages versus 7. But yes, when she was not remembering me, she was kind of early still. But then as it progressed, you got to the point where we had to make sure meals and uh, hygiene and just all those things that come with that journey were being executed. And so it was eye opening. It was definitely eye opening and actually inspiring, because I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for those experiences.
Yeah, I think you're right. We have some entrepreneurs that get into the business because they see the demographics. Nothing wrong with that, right? Like, this is the business, right? There's a lot of money in it. That's what I want to do. Uh, and then we have entrepreneurs that come in thinking, yeah, great demographics, but really, I want to do something good for other people. I
Hmm.
think it's an interesting intersection that our business is both, right? You can, if you execute, have a good living, make good money, but also do well. Did uh, do you think the time with your grandma and then also being a caregiver did it prepare you for the business?
um, yes, yeah, I would say so. You definitely thinking about this reality. So here we are. This is 2026. In just 4 short years, or actually 3 years and some change, there will be more 65 and olders in this country than young folks. And that's in 2030. They call it the silver tsunami. And so, I was prepared from the perspective of, having some understanding of what I now know to be dementia, and maybe she had Alzheimer's, as Alzheimer's being probably the number one quote unquote cognitive change under the dementia umbrella. And so definitely opened my eyes in that regard. And then my caregiving experience, helped me have some empathy and compassion for what folks go through. I think a lot of us, I can only speak for myself. I won't speak for others, but for myself, sometimes we take for granted some of the basic things that we're afforded, i.e., walking, i.e., cognition,
Yeah,
i.e.,
yeah,
being able to bathe yourself, clothe yourself, feed yourself. All these things that we think comes with it, are all blessings. And so no, I think those experiences help prepare me to understand, those dynamics. But then when you get into ownership, particularly of a franchise in this space, you start to realize some of the realities of, what some caregivers, experiences might be in the lives that they might have. And so, there are some eye-opening experiences on that side of it. But by and large, yeah, those experiences between pharma and being a caregiver myself have been superiorly helpful.
Yeah. I remember when I was introduced to Amada in 2011, or maybe it was 2012. We had just started franchising, and Tafa, the founder of Amada, I went on a ride along with him, and he was talking to a client, and the client was really upset about something. Tafa was listening, and then he hung up, and he called his assistant and said, "Hey, I need to send flowers to this family." I said, "Tell me about the client." And she was upset about something that had not been Tafa's fault or the caregiver's fault. She was just upset. And I don't remember if it was the kid, the child of, or it was a senior. I don't remember, but I remember him being so gentle and so kind, even though he knew it had not been our fault what had happened, right? But he was just listening, and I totally understand. And he sent flowers. I was like, okay, this is a weird business. And then I asked him about, well, tell me about this lady, and he mentioned several things, and there was one thing he mentioned, which was, well, she also is to the point now where her dexterity isn't good enough. She can't actually grab a fork and get food from her plate into her mouth. And
Hmm.
I don't know why that, because he's like, she needs help bathing and dressing, all these things. But that one thing, I remember looking at my hands and going, that can happen.
Yeah.
Like I could get to the point where I'm still alive and doing well, but my hands won't work where I can't put food. That was. I think we all have kind of that moment, right, where we
Hmm.
go, what we take for granted, just putting food in our mouths, right,
Yeah.
grabbing something.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Those small things that we need to do every day.
They are, but they're small things in perspective, but they're huge in our actual ability to navigate through each day. So I'm with you. It's it's
Yeah,
it's awesome. But context is real, right? Be grateful, be
context is
humble,
real.
but be hungry. You got to get out here and work. So
Yeah. So you start the business in 23, and you've had you've had an amazing journey, and we never shy away from telling folks that it's going to be really hard, right? And I don't care what business you start, it's going to be challenging. I'd love however much you're willing to share about you start the business and what is it like in that just the first year, between you and Amber. How do you guys go from the corporate America life, raising kids? Your bills don't stop, right? Like kids' activities don't stop, but all of a sudden you've got this new business. Can you talk about what that was like?
sure, it was. We were very um, intentional about the way we kind of navigated um, our lives, particularly as our kids got into high school. And so when we got into the business, we our eldest daughter was already in the Air Force a couple years in. Our youngest daughter, we only have two girls, our youngest daughter was a senior in high school. And so we got in at a time where it definitely worked from a family perspective because we were all able to kind of do for self, and
Yeah.
we were able to kind of partner with each other with some of the work that it took to kind of get the business off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But the realities of the first year. So our story is as follows. My wife, when we started this process, we retired her from her day job. And she immediately, from the time we got an approval from the state to have a license to have a business in our state, she immediately went full time right into the business. I was full time as well, but I also was still in pharma. Because to your point, you got realities. I got kids getting ready to go to college, all those
Right.
things, right?
Right.
And so you do have to navigate that. Now, for us, it worked out because the way we navigated the business was she was going to do all things operationally, and I was going to do things from a sales perspective. And it worked out because at the time I rolled in pharma. was remote, and I could do a lot of that work in the AM before traditional business started, and in the evening post traditional business hours. So I was able to do a lot of marketing and such for Amada, as well as maintain my responsibilities for the other organization. But it definitely, that first year it gets heavy, because first year you're excited to get your doors open, like, yeah, your doors open, surprise, happy. But now doors are open, and it's like, okay, hold on, I got overhead, I got rent to pay, I got all the light from your Wi-Fi. You had to get supplies. You had to get I bought
Yeah.
a starter kit from Amada with a bunch of
Right.
marketing resources and all this good stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like you got a lot of resources going out. There wasn't a lot of resources coming into the business, and so
Right.
you definitely want to be prepared for that. And you can be. Amada does help you kind of navigate that your fiscal kind of understanding, so that you can be fiscally moving in the right direction through the entire process. So for us, we leaned into the process, understanding what we had gotten into. We were prepared fiscally for the things that were to come. And you do everything in your power to beat down doors when you start this business. Start building relationships immediately, actually in advance of opening our doors. I had already been into the hospitals, starting to build some relationships. And within our first, I want to say 3 weeks, we had our first client. And so all that was helpful. But then you're hit with that
Yeah.
excitement again, like, yay, we got our first client, but we need caregivers, right? And so we were, it was an experience, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody yesterday. It's so interesting because there's a big bakery called Paris Baguette. Have you seen this bakery?
No.
It's an Asian, I can't remember which country, but it's a bakery that's now coming into the United States, and it's about $2 million to open it.
That's crazy. Got it. Yeah. It must
And
be,
it
the
takes
profits must
about
be great once you get going. But go ahead. Tell me
I
something.
I it must be
Yeah.
because as an entrepreneur, and you see that with not that it's a bad business, but you see that with hotels, with something that takes a lot of upfront investment before you ever open the door. So Paris Baguette, I was talking to somebody who um, owns the rights to several. They're going to open here in California, and she talked about this idea that uh, it's you have two types of investment, right? You have the upfront capital, which could be, for her, by the time it was going to take 2.5 years to open,
Okay.
2.5 years to open,
Yeah.
and over $2 million invested by the time she opened the first store. I was like, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
And yet with the service business, it's different because the initial investment is much lower than that. There's still an investment there, but you open and it's like you said, it's like there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no clients, there's no caregivers. It's open.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to go and spend those 2 years. It's still a huge investment, right? It's either investing the money or investing a tremendous amount of time um, into building that organization. And
Yeah.
I hope she's an entrepreneur. She's opened other restaurants. She knows what she's doing. So okay, so you get a client pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just the one client.
Mm-hmm.
And we always talk about this business is built one client, one caregiver at a time. Um, by the end of the first year, or when did you get to the point where you felt like taking a breath and you go and almost like this I think this is going to work. I this might actually work out. When
Now, see, I'm going to
when was
be,
that?
yeah, I'll tell you. And now this is going to be a little different, and this is kind of goes about how individuals are wired. For myself, I knew, after doing my homework, talking with Dave, once we verbalized to Amada that this is the step that we were going to take, I knew it was going to work. Put that in context. Going back to the story before Amada, right? It's like life in my journey. I can speak for myself. Every step along the way, from, like I said, being single parent raised in Gary, Indiana, it was the murder capital of the U.S. 2 years of the 4 years of my high school. you experience so many things and you learn what you can do, right? The universe shows you, kind of prepares you, if you will, for what's to come. And so, after we opened our doors and, we got our first client and caregivers and started to build relationships and started to get referrals, I knew, I guess, to your question, or, it was really once you started getting that second and third client and, maybe from a couple different referral sources, that was kind of like, okay, well, maybe I am, fortunate, and, people are, trusting of what we're discussing. And so I guess I'd say that, like, two or three clients in, multiple caregivers in, starting to build trust in my community. That was probably the piece, because we purchased a decent piece of land that starts in like Elgin, Illinois, and goes over west over towards Rockford. We reside in the Elgin area, but Rockford took off first, which is interesting, right?
Mm.
So,
Wow,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Huh.
it's very interesting how it starts. But I would say that, to your question, I'd say, probably three clients in and a couple referrals being repeated from like the hospital. It's like, okay, maybe these people are really hearing us, and, maybe we do have something unique to bring to the market.
You have an interesting story you just shared about you staying at work, Amber going full time. Um, Partnerships are challenging, and you're adding a partnership with the marriage as well. We have a lot of folks, and not just with Amada, right? When you're starting a business and you decide to do it with your spouse, um, it can be very challenging. What's your secret? How do you guys do it? And you guys are an amazing power couple. You've been able to do amazing things with your business. If I was an entrepreneur going, I want to start a business with my spouse. What you'd sit me down and go, okay, let me let me tell you
Yeah,
what you need to do to make that successful.
yeah. I would say, well, first, from your lips to God's ears. But I'd say, you know, prayer. I'll teasingly start with that, but no, in reality, I'd say it really is first and foremost understanding kind of what you both desire. Um, Thankfully for me, my wife was, had aspirations for, I wouldn't necessarily running a business, but she's always kind of, even though she wasn't in her prior career in a leadership role, she's always had leadership dialogue, right? So I kind of
Interesting.
knew, like, the way she would analyze the things that were happening in the businesses that she was working for. I was like, man, I'm just processing it. Like, she didn't understand kind of what she was doing, the type of individual that she was from a, entrepreneurial perspective. But I'd say it really comes down to communication. For us, teasingly, I'd say separating church and state, meaning we're not both in the office full time every day. It's she's the office boss. I am out in the field. I'm the CEO of the organization, but, it's a lot of communication, partnership, and grace, for both
Mm,
parties, right? Because depending on, an individual's background, mine was pharma, corporate, promotions, all this preparation and experiences and exposure, and you come in with a certain perspective, like, oh well, I know that I've experienced, and I know, and then hers was more bedside. So she was a phlebotomist, a surgical tech. So she worked in the hospital and she understood that patient experience piece, right? And so you marry those two. That was very good for us. But what I had to learn was patience, because my experiences, had me in a different place. But so did hers as it relates to the bedside and how we actually,
sure.
from a care perspective. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'd lean back into communication being paramount, right? Communication being everything, and understanding that it's equal footing, right? You separate the marriage from the business, and you have to look at each other as partners equally, and that's in thought, verbalization, and execution.
I love that. I love you said about grace as well, right? What do you mean by grace when you said a lot of grace? What do you mean by that?
Well, because as we know, there's levels to this, if you will, and there's tests at each level. And so, you might be really experienced in sales as a perspective, right? And your partner, my wife in this case, might be the type of person, as you start building, signing more clients there, she might be like, all right, look, no more clients this week, type of thing, right? And so the
Yeah,
point is, it's like you have to have the grace first to let her get that out, right? Not shut
yeah,
that emotion, that dialogue down, but then also the grace to kind of educate and walk through the importance of being there for your referral sources, and being there for the clients who have you've been afforded the opportunity to serve. And so that's what I mean by grace. It's really understanding that no one person is bigger than the brand, right? And
yeah.
understanding how you help each other when you get in those fog spots of this is more important, that is more important, I am more important. You need grace to kind of navigate through that.
And it sounds like that's something that it sounds like to me for you guys that is march your marriage even before the business.
Hmm. Yeah, we it's funny that she's not here because she is, as we discussed prior to the start, she's not a huge fan of doing an interview. What she does commercials for us, but um, this is, I will say, as your business grows, and as you kind of take this undertaking on, being an entrepreneur and owning your own agency, it does come with a lot of work, right? Not depending on an individual's background, right? If you come from sales or if you come from a different background, right? You can look at the work that you've done, take that prepared you for success in the fields that you come from as preparation, regardless of the field. But when you get in here, the work is not so much just the navigating of the relationships with the caregivers and relationships with the client, but it's the work and the reality of it does not stop, right? And so as you grow, right, from we'll be 3 years old June 1 of this year. And so as you go from a two-person operation with some caregivers to starting to build a staff, you're still easily accessible. Even with a couple layers under you, it's at least for us, it's navigating to a certain point to where now you're getting reports about those things versus you being the first to touch. But you
Got
have to
it.
get to that phase. And I think I've talked to owners and other franchise systems, but still in home care. And I don't see it as much at Amada, but I've seen it in other agencies where a person will fight this journey for 2 3 years and building something, and because it gets quote unquote heavy, because it doesn't stop, they leave before the big break, right? The biggest blessing. And so I'd
Yeah,
say
yeah.
you want to stick to it, but also understand that the buck does stop with you. And my wife was, if she was on this call, she would affectionately say, we haven't had an off day in 3 years. That's not true. But it is one of those deals where, in a traditional setting, you work for an employer, you clock out, or you finish
Yeah.
your shift, you go home, it's done.
You turn off.
Tomorrow, right? You can clock out in the brain, or even
Clock
if
out.
you are
Yeah.
an overachiever and you wouldn't clock out in the brain, you're preparing for the next day. At some point, it was still over, right? For that day or that week. When you take on a business in this space and you start to serve your community, while we are non-medical, and that is a reality, if you are compassionate and you're genuine about what you're doing, you do feel, I won't call it a burden, but the responsibility of delivering consistently on quality care, delivering on your word to these families. So it's a process, but it's a good process. You just have to be diligent and understanding, and real with yourself, because it does get heavy, but in a way that it's only preparing you for whatever your goals are. Right? I'll say this, Marcos, you might want me to stop, but I'll just say it. So
Do it.
state, I'd say the number one Amada in the state, let's just say her agency does between $7 and $8 million a year, which is not a bad number, right? My goal for us is 10 million, right? And I feel that we'll achieve that goal within 3 years, maybe four, right? And so the point being, it really is on you, right? You have to, get out here and build some relationships, but you also have to, kind of speak things into existence. We'll be 3 years old, like I say, June 1, and if I look at where trajectory wise a 3 year old agency should be in this system, we're doing very well against those trends. And so, we're
Hmm.
grateful, but we're not satisfied.
Yeah. And you just gotta, you talked about the relationships. It's none of it ever stops, right? It just doesn't stop. You might have more reports, but the buck stops with you at all until you sell the business someday or the kids take it over. It's yours, right? And we talk about that. This idea of never stops, I think, is a really good idea to share with entrepreneurs that your job does, right? You take time off and all that, but and you can take time off in your business, but it is continuously moving in some direction, either hiring or scheduling or billing or payroll or visiting with referral sources, right? It continues, especially if you have that goal of building a large organization, which doesn't
Mm,
have to be everybody's goal, right?
mm-mm,
It's totally up to you what you want to do with it.
mm-mm. No, I'm with.
So, okay, in that journey, then,
Mhm.
um, and I really wanted to just straight up ask you about how is Amada different when you go out into the marketplace and you share the differentiator with that referral source, with that family. There's sharing the differentiation, and then there's also the truth behind the differentiation. Is Amada different from the thousands of home care companies that are out there?
Of course, I'm partial. Sorry, folks that are watching. I like Amada, but no, I'd say it definitely is, and I'll just call out a couple things. I'll start with the people, right? And
Mm,
Marcus, you kind of alluded to it in some of our prior conversation. I'm sure it'll get put together here. Hopefully, you guys will hear it. But Amada was very intentional in the types of individuals that they targeted to to own these franchises, right? So from a people perspective, you're going to there's quality people, right? Like people that bring a lot to the table from a skill set,
mm,
experience, just genuine, down to earth, good people, right? So that piece separately, and I'm not disparaging any other franchise system, but I can only speak to my experiences here. And then the other piece that Amada speaks to, that I think those that kind of walk this through the initial journey of trying to acquire a franchise with Amada, they hear this conversation around long-term care insurance. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, okay, it's like, okay, long-term care insurance, yeah, okay, right, and yeah, it's a big deal. Oh, okay, only 20% of seniors carry. Oh, okay, but then you
yeah,
get out here and you start to realize that every agency will, and I say this to families, every agency will take, from a paying perspective, your long-term care insurance, meaning, hey, if that's how you're funding it, great. Where
right,
Amada differentiates themselves, and it's a big deal in our markets, is how we approach, and I'll just use long-term care as an example here, but how we approach long-term care insurance and those folks who have those policies. I mean, I do a slew or a bunch of free policy reviews. A policy review is where you sit with an individual who owns a long-term care policy, and you sit side to side and you call the insurance company and you ask a bunch of questions. Now, prior to making that call, you explain to the policyholder that you have a significant amount of experience and you know what questions to ask to help understand the details of the policy and how to best navigating, trying to successfully file a claim. And so, that in itself, what I just explained, is a differentiator, right? Because
yeah,
most other agencies, back to my earlier point, will take long-term care as a payer, but they won't do that piece of sitting side by side and helping an individual navigate. The statistics are, I'll just say it this way: there's about 20% of seniors that carry long-term care insurance.
right,
I'll just say, from a myriad of places I've seen details and statistics on the successful actual filing of claims for seniors who own those policies, it's less than half, right? So you say seniors who've owned these policies for 10, 20, in some cases 30, 40 years
Yeah. They've paid a
will
fortune
never,
in premiums.
thank you, in 40 years of paying premiums will never
Yeah.
file a successful claim. And so that,
Crazy.
going back to your question about differentiation, that in itself, when you could sit with someone and they've maybe tried years in the past to file a claim unsuccessfully, and then you sit next to them, you first get them educated to their policy and the details, but furthermore, you help them become a successful filer of a claim and successfully start into that claim. It's life changing for a senior who, using what you spoke to earlier, maybe I'm a senior who my hands aren't as flexible and I don't have this functionality that I once did. And now it's kind of something like this, and it's hard to prepare meals. It's hard to feed myself. You're talking the difference of dark days versus now light for folks. And so for
Yeah.
me and in our market, yes, Amada brings something to the market that a lot of agencies they just don't do, right? And so a lot of free value that is significantly important. And I'll button it up by this, going back to the people. We'll tie both of these things together. Amada is full of such good people that will do those policy reviews for folks who need that help without the expectation that they have to be our client.
That's so cool.
Right? So it's
Yep.
like you're
Yep.
going to do a service, you're going to commit an hour in some cases. Worst case, I've had a 3 hour policy review. That's another story for another day. But you'll do that
Hmm.
for free without the expectation of you then using our
You
agency
must.
as your
Right.
right, right. No,
Yeah.
we don't. And so to me, the people, and using the example of long-term care insurance, and it's almost like a heart, right? You see the what we do and how different Amada is in their approach, very strategic in the way we operate.
I love that. Well, Kevin, I've kept you for over an hour.
All righty.
Thank
Sure
you.
have. It's an hour and 9 minutes. Well,
Isn't that crazy?
yeah. I'll tell my wife I had my first break today. It was an hour and 9 minutes. Yeah. No,
That's
I have
right.
a
Well,
funny thing. I mentioned policy review. That's what I'm about to go do now. I have a 2 o'clock appointment with a gentleman to help him navigate his policy, and then from there back to the office to get some more business handled. But
keep it going.
yeah, man, it doesn't stop. It's you know, I'll say again, thank you for the opportunity in the conversation. You know, if this makes the cut, I will just tell folks, if this is something that you are interested in, lean into it. Don't be afraid of it. It's. I'm sure there's a lot of fear in new things, but this is something that if it's in your heart, mind, and spirit, go after it, and you'll be surprised. You'll look up and you'll be 3 years later, and it's like, man, we're building something great. So all the best to those who try, and to those who try and maybe not choose to follow through. We wish you the best as well.
That's well said, man. Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much. Please send my love to Amber, and maybe on part two, we'll have her join you. Maybe we can convince her.
Good luck. Yeah, look, I'm a good salesperson, not that good. I don't know, so
Not
we'll
that
see.
good.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for being with us, and for all of you watching, please, if you want to learn more about Amada Senior Care, as Kevin said, just give yourself the opportunity, reach out, and we'll walk you through the process. Kevin, great to see you. Thank you so much.
thank you as well, man. Like the t-shirt. Have a good rest of your day.